Hello and welcome to the DVB Newsroom. I'm Nora. I'm joined in studio by John Quinley III, the director at Fortify Rights, a human rights organization focusing on accountability and international justice for the people of Myanmar. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Could you tell me about when and how Fortify Rights first started working on human rights in Myanmar?
Yeah, thanks. So Fortify Rights is a little over a decade old as an organization. We're a human rights organization. We were started actually working in Myanmar. Our theory of change is kind of based on three prongs. So we investigate independently human rights violations. So that's research, documentation, speaking to survivors and eyewitnesses, trying to work as closely as we can with other Myanmar human rights defenders, civil society organizations, sometimes doing joint documentation. Our second prong is kind of engaging, so engaging people in power. And we try to change bad laws, policies, and practices and bring them in line with international human rights standards. And then the third prong is what we call strengthening. So we want to strengthen the local human rights movement in the countries where we're working. So that can involve a lot of different things in the different countries we're working in. But in Myanmar, sometimes we're doing workshops, sometimes training, connecting people to, human rights defenders to people in power. Maybe that's someone from the UN, maybe that's someone from the government. Maybe that's to, accountability mechanisms. So it can look different in the different countries we work in. But those are the three main pillars of our theory of change.
Okay. Since then, your team has tried to hold the Myanmar military accountable for its crimes. What has been the international response to these efforts?
Yeah. We've been, looking at accountability since the start of the organization. We first investigated the atrocities and persecution against the Rohingya population in Arakan State, also known as Rakhine State. At that time there was state-sponsored persecution against the Rohingya. And even under the National League for Democracy, we were trying to talk about accountability for those crimes. Since the Myanmar military coup, we've looked at a bunch of different mechanisms to hold perpetrators accountable, including top senior commanders like Min Aung Hlaing. So we're looking at accountability through the ICC, that's the International Court, Criminal Court, and that's individual accountability, so you can hold individuals accountable. We're looking at prosecutions through the ICJ, International Court of Justice, so that's state crime. That's one state suing another state or trying to work out different problems against another state. Then you have kind of more broad accountability mechanisms. So you have like universal jurisdiction, where you can bring cases in other countries against the Myanmar military. So you have a very prominent case in Argentina for the crime of genocide. Suing Min Aung Hlaing and others. You have a case in Turkey that's ongoing for torture that was filed after the Myanmar coup. Fortify Rights, we also filed a case in Germany, a universal jurisdiction case, looking at crimes against humanity, war crimes, and genocide. And we were supporting 16 survivors of the atrocities to file the case, the criminal case in Germany. Unfortunately, that case was dropped. So now we're looking at other approaches to try to hold the Myanmar military accountable. One of those is through maybe looking at other jurisdictions outside Germany, so maybe refiling the case somewhere else.
Do you think has this case influenced other international legal avenues or approaches in any way?
Yeah, I mean, international accountability is really like a long road, right? It's very slow. And so I talked to a lot of colleagues, friends, people in Myanmar that are really frustrated with international justice. They don't see a lot of hope, and I can empathize with them. It's a very slow process. But we believe in using all the tools in the toolbox, and this international justice is one of the tools we can use. But we've been seeing also state-level government structures in Myanmar also trying to hold perpetrators accountable. So you have state government in Karenni State, the IEC. You have state government in Karen State under the KNU, and they can also, arrest people, hold them accountable for crimes, go through their own independent justice systems. So there's other avenues outside of international accountability.
So what has been the response from Myanmar's neighboring countries? I mean, and how does that affect your work?
Yeah, ASEAN has been quite slow in their response. They don't like to interfere in each other's politics, and I think governments in ASEAN, they copy each other both in good ways and in bad ways, right? So you have, somewhere like Malaysia that has been quite vocal on holding the Myanmar military accountable for crimes against the Rohingya. But of course, Malaysia is also really bad on domestic refugee policy. They detain Myanmar people, Chin people, Rakhine people, Rohingya people. They put them in indefinite detention. But publicly, they're quite vocal about trying to hold the Myanmar military accountable for the crimes. But ASEAN, is I think failing a lot in trying to hold the military accountable. But there's other avenues. So under the ICC, there's what's called an Article 14 referral. And so member states of the ICC who've signed the Rome Statute, that includes in ASEAN, that includes Timor-Leste and Cambodia. Timor-Leste has been quite vocal about holding the junta accountable for its crimes. And they could bring an Article 14 referral. This has happened in other places. An Article 14 referral is just an ICC member state. We're writing a letter to the OTP saying we think we should refer the situation in Myanmar to the ICC, the International Criminal Court. And that's quite easy. That's like a letter. It could be 1 or 2 pages, and any member state of the ICC could do it. So we've been pushing for a long time, trying to get a coalition of governments to recommend Article 14 referral in the situation of Myanmar. And that will bypass blockages at the UN Security Council and other places where there's a lot of vetoes that happen from China or from Russia. So we see this as maybe another avenue to try to hold perpetrators accountable.
In 2016 and 2017, the Rohingya faced a military crackdown in northern Rakhine State, which is now being called a genocide. How is Fortify Rights pursuing justice for the Rohingya?
Yeah, thanks for that question. The plight of the Rohingya has been one that the world has followed really closely. I think we've been working with the Rohingya community since we were founded. So it's a population we want to continue to work with. And we've seen even after the Myanmar military coup, the people of Myanmar also supporting Rohingya, and there being unity and diversity in them seeing that the Myanmar military is the main problem, right? For the Rohingya, we've documented ongoing violations committed against the Rohingya. We wrote a report after 2017 looking at preparations for genocide and genocidal intent. And the U.S. government, soon after that report, a few years later, made a genocide determination. The U.S. government has not made very many genocide determinations. So we saw that as a really important step. That came with humanitarian support, refugee resettlement numbers for Rohingya, and other kind of more practical measures. We've also seen, the case at the ICJ. They've issued provisional measures. Provisional measures basically says, well, the court has not decided if what's happening is genocide or not. But provisional measures say that before the court decides, there should be things in place that try to stop ongoing persecution or ongoing genocide. So the Myanmar military junta now has to submit every 6 months to the ICJ. They have to submit a report saying how they've tried to stop ongoing genocide in Myanmar. Unfortunately, those reports are not public. They're private reports that are submitted by the Myanmar junta. But we obviously see in Rakhine State right now, the provisional measures are being broken. There's still ongoing persecution. There's still ongoing genocide. Rohingya are still forced to take national verification cards, what they call NVCs. They're not allowed to be granted full citizenship rights. There's an ongoing armed conflict in northern Rakhine State by the Arakan army and by the Myanmar military, and Rohingya have been trapped in the middle of that. And it's important to note that not only is the Myanmar military responsible for crimes against the Rohingya, recently we've also seen how the Arkan army has persecuted the Rohingya, have attacked the Rohingya, arrested, killed. They've attacked them with artillery shells, drones. Fortify Rights and my colleagues documented a case on August 5th, the Naf River Massacre, which was a killing of about 100 Rohingya civilians as they were fleeing downtown Mungdal, coming towards the Naf River. Women, children, men, elderly people were attacked by artillery and mortars, and also drone strikes. At least 2 drones dropped bombs on that population. We found that there was reasonable grounds to believe that the Arkan army was the one that conducted that attack, and we called on them to end their abuses against the Rohingya, and for the ICC actually to make the crimes by the Arkan army part of their ongoing investigation.
So how do you work with Rohingya communities to ensure their voices are heard in these justice efforts?
Yeah, we work with the Rohingya community a lot of different ways. We've helped Rohingya civil society groups submit to the International Investigative Mechanism on Myanmar. They call it the IIMM. The IIMM was set up to collect and then preserve evidence. So if there's a future prosecution, future court that opens to try international crimes, the IIMM will submit evidence to that court. So we know that the IIMM has submitted evidence to the ICJ and the ICC and to the case in Argentina that our colleague Toon Kin brought. So we've helped Rohingya groups get connected to the IIMM, submit information to them. We've done human rights trainings for Rohingya civil society groups, human rights documentations trainings. So we've worked with Rohingya civil society in Bangladesh to learn how to document crimes themselves. We're an international group, we can document violations, but we really want Rohingya people to be able to document the crimes happening against their own community themselves. So we've worked to do workshops and trainings for them to understand human rights principles and also work alongside them to document crimes happening in Bangladesh and happening in Myanmar.
In 2021, the military ousted Aung San Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy government, replacing it with a military regime led by Senior General Min Aung Hlaing. Fortify Rights has been documented crimes committed by the military since the coup. What are some of the unique challenges of documenting crimes in such a high security environment?
Yeah, I think Myanmar journalists probably know better than us that it's a very difficult environment to gather evidence, to get access to places. My Myanmar colleagues that are working every day, some of them with a lot of security issues, they're the ones at the forefront of Fortify Rights. They're the ones documenting the crimes that we release in our public reports. So my Myanmar colleagues are actually the ones that are navigating those very difficult situations. We see the internet blockage as one major issue that has made it very hard to gather evidence in places where the internet is shut off in Myanmar. They've shut it off in places like Karenni. There's only Starlink now. They've shut it off in large parts of Sagaing, Magwe, and they've intermittently shut it off in Arkan state as well, places that were trying to document crimes. Also, even going to some of the places where the Myanmar military is committing abuses, meaning airstrikes or attacks against civilian populations, there's an ongoing war, right? So I think it's an area that's really hard to access. But we've been, earlier this year, I went with a colleague to Karenni State. We worked alongside the KNDF and the IEC to go and document crimes in Damoso and in Loikaw. We documented airstrikes in Dosii village that killed, children. This was an indiscriminate attack and what we would consider a war crime. So we're trying to actively think about ways that we can get access to places where we can talk to survivors and eyewitnesses. I would say the surviving eyewitnesses that we're talking to, they're really the courageous people. We are honored to be able to talk to them every day, and they share their stories with us. So we take that really seriously, and we want to be able to use the stories they share with us and try to make an impact and try to showcase the crimes by the Myanmar military.
What steps is Fortify Rights taking to get member states of the International Criminal Court, or ICC, to hold Myanmar's military leaders accountable? I mean, have any member states shown particular support for this effort?
Yeah, I think as I talked about earlier, we've been really trying to push, and actually Tom Andrews, the UN SR on Myanmar, has also recommended that ICC member states refer the situation under Article 14, and that would bypass different avenues where there's blockages. So we've seen some interest in some of the smaller states, Timor-Leste. We've been calling on smaller European states to join a coalition to be able to refer the situation. But I mean, the situation in Myanmar has been really slow. International accountability in Myanmar has been very, very slow. There's not a wider ICC investigation. The current ICC investigation is around the crime against humanity of deportation related to Bangladesh being the one as a member state of the ICC saying that, okay, you can investigate crimes on Bangladesh soil. So the prosecutor at the time, she made an interesting legal argument that said, okay, well, we have crimes against humanity, and one of those crimes is deportation. So Rohingya that have been forcibly deported to Bangladesh, we can look into that crime. One thing that she did was say the ICC can look into the crime against humanity of deportation and other crimes. So that opens it up a little bit to looking at other various crimes, sexual violence, artillery attacks, other things, but that's not an investigation that is open throughout all of Myanmar. So that's something that we as an organization really want to see member states be active in opening up a wider investigation against what's happening in Karen State, what's happening in Karenni State, what's happening in Yangon and Mandalay. There's ongoing human rights violations and serious international crimes, war crimes, crimes against humanity happening against not just the Rohingya and Rakhine, which is where the deportation case is, but actually throughout the whole of Myanmar. So that's something that we spend every day thinking about. How do we open up that wider investigation? How do we get interest for member states to see that the crimes are happening throughout Myanmar?
How optimistic are you about the ICC involvement given its limitations and jurisdictional challenges?
Yeah, I think I'm optimistic. I'm kind of an internal optimist. I think it's one of the tools. It's not perfect, but it's something that I hope one day to see people be brought before the ICC. The ICC has brought other cases in other countries. In 2019, they did something interesting. The 2 Myanmar soldiers confessed on video in 2019 to committing crimes against the Rohingya. These were Myanmar military soldiers. They were eventually, those 2 soldiers, they made their way to Bangladesh, and from Bangladesh they were extradited to The Hague. And the ICC, they're currently in the custody of the ICC. I don't think they're being tried as perpetrators. They're probably being held as what they consider like insider witnesses. But you can see that there was some political will at that time to try to get people from Bangladesh, from Myanmar, to The Hague. Maybe those people should have been tried actually as criminals. I think the ICC has a kind of a long pattern of only wanting to hold high-level perpetrators accountable. But actually there's a lot of mid-level perpetrators that maybe should be also held accountable at the ICC. And the prosecutor there should think about, okay, if we can't get the highest level perpetrators at the ICC, what about the mid-level people that are also responsible for these crimes? But of course you can't try everyone that's committed abuses. I know, and I'm really interested in what ethnic resistance organizations are doing. You have people defecting from the Myanmar military, people that are fleeing the military and joining the resistance. And I see the resistance organizations being really open to, okay, if these people are willing to help us, they can train a new PDF, they can give us information. So there's kind of this ongoing support that defectors are giving, people that have maybe committed abuses, who have maybe decided to flee. They've given them some sort of immunity. I know they've put others in jail, but I think there's this kind of middle ground where they're kind of giving some reconciliation, some amnesty to people that are willing to support and can be shown to support the ongoing armed and peaceful revolution. So there's not just, you can't try every single perpetrator in a court, and I think there's a lot of people that have realized that the Myanmar military is the problem, and now they're joining the resistance. And the NUG has publicly announced that they want more defections. They want more people to come to the resistance side. They want more people to share evidence of ongoing crimes, and I think that's important. We recently were working with a military defector that shared 10 pieces of video evidence with us of torture in a detention facility in Myanmar. This person made it outside of Myanmar and shared this evidence. And this is kind of what I would see as a kind of a defector whistleblower, right? He wasn't active in conflict. He was a kind of a bureaucratic soldier. And he was open to wanting to share evidence. And so I think that's an important part of accountability is these people that have videos, photographs, testimony of military crimes being open and willing to share and also being protected. He needs protection. He needs to be, seen as a proper whistleblower. We call him a defector whistleblower. So I think people like this should be looked at and maybe given protection or support from different governments or different accountability mechanisms.
So what are the main methods Fortify Rights uses to verify these incidents in such volatile conditions?
Yeah, very difficult, yeah. We work through a lot of human rights defenders. We try to get as close as we can to the problem. One thing that we do quite often is what we call triangulation. So if there's an incident, like a killing that happens, for example, there was a killing in Shadal, or there's been recent killings in Budalin in central Myanmar. What we would want to do is be able to talk to multiple eyewitnesses and survivors of one incident. So we wouldn't rely on one witness to a crime. We would want to interview as many people as we can about that crime, and we would want to triangulate it from different angles, different viewpoints, right? And we would want to make sure that those people speaking to us, if there are 3 or 4 witnesses, they are all saying similar things, right? Not one person saying it happened at 3 a.m., another person saying, oh, it happened a week later. You want the testimony to be similar and to match. And we don't want to rely on one single testimony when it comes to documenting crime. So we try to do a lot of that triangulation. We also try to look at photograph and video evidence quite often now and try to verify it. So yeah, those are some of the techniques that we're using.
Since the Arakan Army or AA launch its offensive in Rakhine State on November 13th last year, the Rohingya are facing attacks from both the AA and the military. How is Fortify Rights documenting attacks on civilians? Yeah,
I think Rakhine State right now has a bunch of different armed actors. So you have the Arakan Army, you have the Myanmar military, and then you also have Rohingya militant groups. So you have the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army, and you have Rohingya Solidarity Organization, RSO. So between these 4 different armed actors, they're all kind of fighting each other. Some of them are aligned with each other. So we recently publicized information that RSO was actively working with the Myanmar military, abducting Rohingya from Bangladesh, bringing them across the border to Myanmar, and actually giving them over to the Myanmar military to fight against the Arakan Army. So we see them, there's different conflict dynamics that we see that are ongoing. On the Archon Army, they're really starting to use discriminatory, racist rhetoric against the Rohingya. This has been pushed by the Myanmar military. The Myanmar military, when they're losing in battle, because the Archon Army is very good at fighting, they've taken huge swaths of territory in Rakhine State. They're very good at fighting. So the Myanmar military is losing in Rakhine State. And so one tactic that the Myanmar military uses when they're losing is they divide and rule. They divide the communities to fight against each other because they see no other option. They're losing people, they're losing men, they're having defections. The Archon Army has a lot of weapons, a lot of manpower, a lot of support. And so you see this ongoing divide and rule tactics. And so the Rohingya community and the Archon Army right now are having a lot of frictions. And the Archon Army actually, as I said before, they committed an attack against over 100 people on the Naf River. That's women, children. There was some RSO men in that group that were fleeing. But under international law, you have to look at what they call proportionality. So did that attack have a real military aim? And what we found as Fortify Rights is there wasn't there was a extremely disproportionate attack. So they killed many more civilians, women and children, than they actually killed armed actors, RSO members. And so it wasn't a strategic military target. These people were fleeing. And we found it as likely a war crime that happened on the Naf River on August 5th. We also documented the mass arson in Butidong that happened a few months before the August attacks. It's important to note that the AA is helping the revolution. They're fighting against the Myanmar military, but I wouldn't consider them a revolutionary group. They're not focused on democracy and human rights and real federalism, real unity amongst the population. So yes, at one side they're supporting the revolution because they're really good at fighting, but they're not actually, from what I can tell, very interested in unifying the country, in respecting human rights, and in wanting a federal, democratic, rights-respecting country. They're very interested in having their own area, their own region, and fighting against the Myanmar military. So we would call, when we've done this, we've tried to say that the AA should respect Rohingya rights, treat them as equals in Myanmar. Rohingya are Myanmar citizens. And as the AA takes more territory, there's what we call internment camps. Some people call them IDP camps. Rohingya have been trapped in these internment camps for over a decade. As the AA comes to these areas, they should allow Rohingya outside the camps. They should allow them freedom of movement. They should grant them political representation. They should grant them the ability to say, we want abuses against us investigated by the ULA, the political wing of the AA. If they start to do these kinds of things, then they would be considered a real revolutionary group, right? But right now, I think AA is more a part of the problem than the solution in Rakhine State.
So what is Fortify Rights working on at the moment?
Yeah. We've been actively documenting crimes, I think, again, on Rohingya, crimes by ARSA and RSO. That's crimes happening in Rakhine State and crimes happening in Bangladesh. So we've documented how ARSA, which is a Rohingya militant and political group, have actively assassinated, abducted, threatened and harassed Rohingya human rights defenders that oppose them. Peaceful Rohingya people that say that ARSA is not a group that they want to support. We see ARSA retaliating against these people, abducting them, torturing them, threatening them. So we're actively documenting those abuses. In Karenni and in Kachin State, we're actively documenting airstrikes and other war crimes and displacement. And we hope to publish more on the use of air and our artillery strikes by the Myanmar military, and call for, look at advocacy around a jet fuel embargo and a global arms embargo. That has not happened currently. There's not a coordinated effort to stop fuel and weapons going to the Myanmar military. So that's something that we're actively looking at. And we want to work more closely with Myanmar civil society groups. We want to do more technical support for them. We want to do joint investigations, so actually shadowing each other, doing co-learning from each other, and actively trying to document crimes. And so those are some of the kinds of work we're doing now. But we will not stop working until Myanmar is free and democratic, and we see the Myanmar people as courageous, and we want to come alongside them and support them. We're not the leading voice, but we can, as an international group, we can come alongside and support the Myanmar people as best as we can. But we want to listen to the Myanmar people and see how they want us to support them, what we can do to help them, and we try to listen to them as much as we can to try to do that work.
Before we conclude,
Yeah.
What message would you share with those people who may feel distant from the human rights issues in Southeast Asia? What would you say to inspire them to take an interest or action?
I would say Myanmar people are just like any people, right? We have electricians, we have people working in tech companies, we have doctors, we have nurses, teachers. So I would say people in the West, this is a war happening against people just like ourselves, right? They're not different than anyone else. And I think crime impunity happening throughout the world makes more impunity in other places possible, right? So I would encourage people to, read the news happening in Myanmar, read local news like DVB. I would encourage them to donate to peaceful movement, to CDM, to doctors, to nurses, to humanitarian groups. The UN is signing MOUs with the Myanmar junta, and I think there's a lot of really good work happening along the border, along the Indian border, along the Thai border, along the Bangladesh-Myanmar border. And these humanitarian groups deserve support, and even $5, $10 can really go a long way to helping displaced communities. So I would say there's small things that people can do even to help the Myanmar people. They don't have to become human rights workers, but everyone can be a human rights person in their daily lives, right? So yeah, support local journalists like DVB, support local humanitarian groups. Would be, even small bits of money or human capital can really help.
Thank you for the insightful discussion.
Yeah, thank you. DVB is a very courageous group, so I'm honored to be here. Thanks so much.
Okay.